There's something very earthy and generous about this sculpture, maternity. They're qualities it shares with its creator, Llew Summers. Llew's a sculptor from Christchurch. His work is, well, almost confronting in its sheer physicality. Llew looks for ways to celebrate the life force embodied in each of us. He's fascinated by the way our bodies express our humanness. And as a Christian, he's distressed that so much art has hidden away the physical character of the human Jesus. Perhaps to redress the balance, Llew sculpted a naked Jesus. Some people were outraged, but Llew was unrepentant. Another of his works, Ecce Homo, has drawn its own share of attention.
It's a fun piece on the one hand, but it has got a serious title, and it is to sort of celebrate maleness or masculinity, I suppose, is the best way of sort of saying it. Ecce Homo, or Behold the Man, were the last words that Pontius Pilate said to the crowd when he gave Christ to the crowd. Those words that Pilate used were saying, see, he's just a man. And every man that's ever had a penis must have had an erection. So without it, when none of us are here, it's the life force within us. So I made that piece, which is fairly challenging in a way, because you don't very often see naked males, let alone naked males with an erection. By giving it that title, I want it to raise the question. They'll laugh at it. You know, sex is fine so long as it's kind of naughty or dirty, or, you know, so long as it's sleaze, or, you know, it's a weird contradiction, I think.
But a lot of your work is actually about celebrating the value and the dignity of the human body as a whole.
Absolutely. That's what I want to do more than any other single thing, is to celebrate humanity. And like I say, that is a fun piece on the one hand. It's a man doing the splits and his arms are out and he's flying in every direction. So he does have that absolute fun side to him.
When did you get into developing or cultivating a spiritual thread within your work?
It had been always a dream to do some religious work. I have a very strong faith, and but I'd never seen a way of doing it, really. And a whole lot of things happened, and I don't really know what was the key one. But my partner Rose, who moved in with me in 1977, she died, and I'd got a grant to go overseas, and I put that off for a year, and I went overseas in 1999, and I think the fact that you're confronting your own mortality more, you realise the relevance to some extent of churches and religion in a way. When you're in places like Italy, they seem to be on every corner. And I designed while I was there these things I call icons and shrines, which are kind of meditative pieces, which were made mostly big blocks of wood with an arched top, with a cutout, with a heart and cross and things like that in it. Very Catholic stuff. And I've always been fascinated by the risen Christ. I used to go briefly to the Anglican church in Avonside, and there was a minister there, Ray Oppenheim, and he, at Easter time, he used to come in and he'd say, "Christ is risen," and the congregation would respond, "He is risen indeed." And it seems odd that that's the first time I'd ever heard that statement. I was brought up in the Methodist church, and the emphasis for so much of religion is on the crucifix, whereas to me the magic of Christianity is the risen Christ. To me, that's the fantastic thing. Like, people were crucified every day. It doesn't have to be Christ to be crucified. So I made a risen Christ over the Port Hills, actually, with a whole crowd of people and this sort of figure floating in the sky. And then I looked around at other ideas, and at the same time I was at the Saviorside Church, there was a set of stations put in there, and I thought, oh, I'll have a go at those. And
the Stations of the Cross.
The Stations of the Cross, yeah. And I just randomly carved a set, and they're all different sizes and scales and everything. So I carved them out, and then 3 or 4 years later, the church approached me with the idea of making some. It seems a ridiculous thing to do, to make a set of stations without having a job, but that shows you how mad I can be, or how, I don't know. Anyway, I ended up selling that set of stations to the church. One of the stations is the stripping of Christ. It seems phenomenal that on the one hand you make Christ as you're showing his total vulnerability. I've actually been stripped off in the police cell with no clothes on, and you feel vulnerable and shaky. Yeah, it seems amazing that on the one hand you have that station, but in fact you never see the naked Christ. And it's all to do with Puritanism, or it's all trying to pretend Christ doesn't have a penis, or the penis is evil or dirty or something. It's all making sex wrong in my mind. That's what I think it's denying sexuality, like Christ was a man. I made the crucifix naked, and then the bishop said no, he couldn't handle it. There was a no-no around it, absolute. And so there was a lot of arguments, so I covered him in plaster in the end, so he's complete. And that was my sort of compromise to them. But there's still quite a bit of protest about them. You know, as an artist, you should be doing something new. Whatever the issue is, you should be doing something fresh. And so, invariably, it raises a question, but also, people don't really want to be challenged. They want to stick with what they know. And somebody else said to me, oh, they all look like different people, the Christ figures. And I said, well, that's good, you know, because Christ could have been a Samoan, he could have been a South American. And so by having them looking as different people, you're actually bringing them into more here and now.
So your stations are actually making them more universal in a sense.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
By making them more particular.
Yeah.
You were raised as a Methodist. Tell us about your upbringing and your parents.
Well, I come from a reasonably unusual family. I think there were 7 of us in the family. My mother was the only woman imprisoned in New Zealand during the war for preaching pacifism in Pigeon Park, actually, in Wellington. Oh. She was done for sedition, I think it was called at the time. Yeah.
That's a pretty courageous act.
Yeah, but my father went overseas to war. He was an art critic, but he was in love with literature and the arts, really. Well, he knew Colin McCann well as a boy, and he knew Wollaston and people like that. One of the great things about that was that when you're starting off as an artist, like, people invariably think you should have a real job, or it's not real work, or it's, you know, it's just indulgence or something like that. But when you've come from a background like that, it does make it all right. It's fair enough that you're doing this, you know. My father's great passion was the nude, actually, so he didn't have major issues around that. And in fact, I was brought up with, there was a picture above the fireplace, a large painting of Rubens' rape of the daughters of Llew Summers, and they're sort of all intertwined into fat ladies falling off, sort of. They don't actually look like they're being raped or anything.
It's a very vibrant, voluptuous kind of scene.
Yeah, well, all the Rubens' paintings tend to be big fat woman, really. And Tony Thomason used to come round home, he said, I'm just waiting for one of those women to fall out and fall onto the out in front of the fire. I was brought up with nude paintings in the house, which not many people are. Yeah, he was interested in literature and poetry. He wrote novels, he wrote things like that. And like I say, he reviewed a lot of art. He didn't paint, but painting was his great passion, I think, yeah.
There was a violent side to his nature.
My father was a pretty angry man, yeah. It's interesting, really, because between my mother and my father, I think he was the more loving, but he was actually, very angry, which...
So very demonstrative in both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And he thought they sort of went together, I think. He thought you couldn't have one without the other. And I think, in a way he believed in his anger, but it meant you couldn't really have a discussion with him. He kind of... He lectured. He was a raver.
Right.
Yeah. And I've got a little bit of
I was going to say, what have you inherited from your father?
Yeah. Well, I was quite violent with my partner. I was violent. I find it fascinating that, in a way, that you're violent with the people you love them. Well, for me, I'm violent with the people I love the most, and I was certainly violent with my children, and I was violent with my partner Rose. And actually, doing anger management is the best thing I've ever done in my life, I think, because I think as a violent person, your relationship is all sort of up and down. It's extremely loving, and then it's it's horrendous. It's horrific. You don't like yourself. Right, you know, like it's not a nice way to be.
Is it a hard thing to manage? I mean, do you have to actively manage?
No, I'm not aware of that at all. Not in the slightest. But I just walk out. I haven't actually lived with anybody since Rose died.
That anger management and sorting has been life-saving for you in some ways.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Well, Rose and I couldn't have carried on with my violence the way it was. No, couldn't have at all. No. Rose and I built a house in 1990. I've got 2 acres of land, and I've got quite a large house designed by David Brochery and built out of second-hand materials. Because I used to be a builder, I did all the building myself. It was good. On that property, I've also got a little house where I run an artist's residence. I have a student lives here, or 2 students at the moment, living there rent-free for a year at a time. So it's a little project I have going, like art students, right. and supposedly based on the principle of sort of poverty. Really, you know, I'd like to be helping somebody out. That, you know, yeah. I never think much about what work I'm going to do. I never actually know next week what I'm going to be doing next week, actually. I have ideas. Often, you know, I work from photographs, and even that Behold the Man is from a photograph, but it's you would never recognise the photograph as some sort of ballet dancer, extremely skinny man, actually. But I work from photographs, but that's just a guiding sort of thing. But sometimes I'll work straight from the imagination, you know, not all, you know, a bit of everything.
You have strong belief.
Yeah.
Tell me about that belief. Tell me what your faith is.
I've never particularly questioned religion. It's kind of something which I have and I like. And actually, if I was going to get into a religion, I'd probably go to the Catholic Church now.
You don't go to church?
No, I don't go to church.
Did you went to Methodist
I like
churches
ceremony.
when you were little?
Like the Methodist church with their wee glasses of raspberry.
Right.
I think you Presbyterians do that too, don't you? I don't know. I mean, how rubbishy is that? Like, I love the fact that people all drink the wine out of the one cup. Because that is a lowering to all of us being on the same level.
It's part of the point of the Eucharist too, isn't it? Yeah.
I'm sorry?
It's part of the point of the Eucharist that you're all one body.
Shared. Yeah, I think that's tremendous, you know. And so, I quite like the idea of ceremony, which I think's gone out of our life so much. I mean, TV meals and rubbish like that, I couldn't be bothered. It's horrible. I don't say grace when I'm on my own, but if I ever have people at home for a meal, I say grace. And partly, that's just as simple as saying, aren't we lucky?
Right.
There's food in front of us. You know, we're lucky. We're privileged. Ebony! Oh! But it's also about the sharing, and that's one reason I like having flatmates,
so
is having a meal together.
What do your flatmates reckon about you saying grace?
Oh, they take the piss. Oh, here we've got to have a Llew moment.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, that's the current flatmate. They call it a Llew moment. Yeah. Are you going to say grace for me? Ebony? Why not? What about you, boy?
No.
Oh, Reuben.
Okay.
Oh.
I forgot. I didn't know what you'd say.
Oh, well, you have to say it after me, all right? Oh, Lord, make us
I love my cat.
truly thankful
Truly thankful.
for what we are about to receive. You know, it's not deadly serious. Like, I mean, that's another thing with religion that gets up your bloody nose is the sort of seriousness. I mean, God's got a sense of humour, you know?
Does God have a sense of humour?
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Absolutely. And Christ must have had a sense of humour. You know, there's different books in the Bible. My father found this one book which isn't in the regular Bible, and he found that Christ was dancing on the Mount of Olives or whatever, and he was rapt, because it's almost the only mention of Christ dancing.
Yeah, Christ and rock and roll don't go together, do they, you know?
Not for most people, but there's no reason why not.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, life is to enjoy.
Yeah.
That's what the Dalai Lama says, life is to enjoy. It's a stupid, simple statement, but it's absolutely everything.
Just because it's for me.
Oh, just pass me the wine, will you?
What do you think about the churches?
Well, obviously the churches are stuffed up, and we always, you know, well, I mean, the paedophilia in the churches is a terrible, terrible thing, and I mean, it's got to have come in the Catholic Church somehow. I mean, the fact they expect men to deny their sexuality is so contradictory. It's so wrong in my mind, you know. And yeah, well, I mean, I there's aspects of the Catholic Church I really like, but I mean, the fact that they're not allowed to use condoms, I mean, get out of here. It's ridiculous. To me, it would just seem that you know, see, I like dogma, but there's a lot of dogma I don't like, you know. That's
So the church's attitude to sexuality is one that troubles you a lot.
Oh, yeah, I think so. Yeah. Well, there's too much emphasis on it. There's too much emphasis on the fact that it's wrong or dirty or something, you know, yeah.
What is it about the way churches celebrate that means you don't want to go and be part of a church community?
I'd possibly find it a wee bit boring, actually. Yeah, I'm a fairly active person, and I don't, you know, I have this funny work pattern, but, well, it's not a funny work pattern. I don't work Sundays. I never work Sundays. So, but Sundays is my day off, but I tend to go out surfing, or I'll go out and do some leisure pursuit on a Sunday. I love water, actually. That's my favourite. I like tramping too. I go tramping once or twice a year. So, yeah, I'm quite an outdoorsy sort of person. I like going out with my nephews and my children and go shooting occasionally, hares and rabbits and stuff like that. And I eat them. You know, I quite like the idea of, I'm a bit of a hunter-gatherer. I used to be a diver, you know, we used to go to Banks Peninsula and dive for paua and mussels and stuff like that. I've always done quite a bit of diving. But the need isn't quite there the same now, because I don't have, my children aren't at home, and it's not the crowds to feed or something like that. You know, loaves and fishes stuff, really.
Are you interested in the questions like the nature of God, who God is, and who's Jesus for you?
Well, yeah, I don't really know about that. You know, I don't know that I've got God up there on a chair or something. Like people that have had afterlife experiences talk about how wonderful the feeling is, and full knowledge. All their questions are answered, so maybe that's God, I don't know. Christ, I suspect, was obviously a prophet, but whether it was all as magical as, you know, I don't like things like the Catholics where they say Catholic Church is the one true faith and all that. Like, I wouldn't go with that sort of rubbish. You know, I mean, if you're a Buddhist, good on you. No, I don't have any.
So you don't have a problem with other religions?
No, not at all. No.
Listening to you, it seems to me that the issue of having faith in a way is more important than what that faith might be in.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah.
So what difference does that faith make to you?
Well, I think politically it makes me a socialist, you know. People say, are you a Christian? I say, well, is George Bush a Christian? Because if he says, well, I'm probably not, you know. I think mass murderers and me don't quite go together, you know, that's the way I see it. But I'm a sort of a socialist. I think that's probably the one single thing of how it affects me politically. So rather than being forever greedy, I feel like I'd like to help my fellow man, you know, like that's why I'm against capital punishment. He's my brother, you know. It's a simple way of getting rid of your problems to execute people, isn't it? You know, I mean, we are responsible for all the murderers in New Zealand. I mean, we made them as a culture.
You mentioned Rose's death, and that's kind of raised some questions for you, or answered some questions. I don't know, what do you think about death and what there may or may not be afterwards?
Well, I always assume that life can't be just about this here and now. It seems too, probably too shallow, I suppose. And it's got to have a purpose for a reason. Rose's death for me was actually the most wonderful experience of my life, and it's not that one you'd wish on anybody, but at the same time, and it's kind of horrendous, but every couple you know, somebody's going to die before the other. And in some ways, Rose knew she was dying for a year, and I think that was the worst thing for her but the best thing for me. I mean, because I had a chance to get used to it. We were in bed together the night she died, you know, so, and to go on that journey with somebody is pretty amazing, actually, I think, yeah. We did all the funeral from home, we did everything ourselves. We dug the grave, had the coffin, my nephew made the coffin, and we took it to the church in the back of my van, and it was a wonderful ceremony. And then we took it to Pigeon Bay and buried it at Pigeon Bay, and I did the ashes to ashes, dust to dust thing. And that was really healing, actually. It was great. Like, Rose was a singer. We sang 4 hymns at the funeral, and I like singing. So I like those things which, like, that to me is a celebration of life, you know? And also the communal thing of all doing it together. It's like sharing the wine, it's dancing, singing, sex, all those things in life are kind of celebratory of life, I think. Yeah.
So, is Rose gone?
Yeah, but I always have this notion personally that that I'll see her again. It all comes from that reading various people's afterlife experiences, that when they go through this tunnel or whatever and they see this light and they meet these people that they've known before who have died. I've always really had that sort of basic sort of faith, but I know, maybe it's all bullshit, who knows. You know, like I've read David Lodge is a British writer, and he said, you know, every atheist, if they're crashing in a plane, well, you might as well pray. I mean, you got on the loose. You know,
both sides.
Yeah,
just in case.
Cover your
bases.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not until something like that would happen, really, that you would. That's really when the question comes up for you. I mean, death is the ultimate. And, you know, when you're young, you think about death a lot, but actually, when you're old, it's more real.
As New Zealand society becomes a kind of a post-church society anyway, maybe post-religious society, do you think we're diminished because of that? Do you think we lose anything when religion becomes historical rather than real for people?
Oh, I think absolutely we lose. You know, we don't take time to meditate. We don't take time to celebrate how lucky we are. But we think we control the world. I mean, well, we've been raping the world for the last bloody 100 years, haven't we? I mean, we've used most of the oil, electricity, we use every bloody thing. We're just takers, really. And that's why we're into genetic engineering now and things like that, which also sort of are overstepping God. We are God, you know. Yeah.
So it puts us outside that natural order.
Yeah, I believe in the natural order very much, you know. I just think, because all the other things to me are thin end of the wedge, because once you start on things like euthanasia, well, I heard recently a program in Holland or somewhere where these old people are feeling the pressure.
Right, okay,
you know, they should top themselves, you know, they're useless, you know, they should get out of here, you know.
You carved a piece, Guardian Angel, for Rose's daughter. Can you tell us about that?
New Year's Day last year, Rose's daughter committed suicide, which was horrific, actually, and I was dumbstruck by it, really. And she was living away. She's a husband and 2 children, and she was always appeared to be the happiest one in the family. It's a lucky thing as an artist, actually, that you do have the ability to work out some of your issues in your work, you know. And so then I came up with this idea of making an angel, a big angel, and it's called Guardian Angel. I went to the thing for her death where a lot of people talked, and I sort of gave this bit of a talk there where I said that, you know, I think this is a terrible option and the worst thing anybody could do to their children and their family. And I think the trouble with suicide is we're not allowed to talk about it, actually, and I don't actually agree with that. I don't understand why, you know, today the approach is, you know, if you're an alcoholic, if you talk about it, you're confronting it, you're opening it up for the rest of the world. Suicide, no. But I believe that that's partly because of our lack of faith that we're not allowed to talk about suicide anymore. Because there's one, you know, well, in the Catholic Church, you couldn't be buried on consecrated ground. So it was an absolute no. Whereas today people say, I understand that, you know, and at some point we're going to say, no, this is not an option. Once you've opened it up as an option, more happens. And it's the cruelest thing that can ever happen, I think.
When you spoke, if you like, against her choice, it wouldn't necessarily have been well received.
Well, interesting enough, one person crossed the crowd and shook my hand and said, thanks for confronting it. And that was fantastic for me because I felt like very much like an outsider, and everybody's talking about Dushka's very positive nature, which she certainly had.
Right.
But in some way she was living a tremendous lie because I had no idea she was unhappy. I hadn't realised the unhappiness that went with it. Whatever the critics say, my work's going on, actually. You know, whether it's been said 20 years ago or 30 years ago, the work's still out there and it's still in some way working. And hopefully it'll work after you're dead. I mean, an artist never knows their worth. You can't know your worth. Like, I'd never make a work just to be confrontational.
Right.
Like, I can't stand that idea, actually, because then it's just publicity seeking. And you don't make a work to be publicity seeking, but it must have some sort of challenge. It's got to have some sort of challenge, otherwise it's nothing. It's like that thing, you know, if you don't get reviewed, it's worse than having a bad review because you've been ignored. There's nothing worse than being mundane, is there? You know.
This program was made with funding from New Zealand On Air.